Welcome to everyone, and thank you for joining this conversation with the artist Jong-Oh. 안녕하세요, Jong.
Hola, Sabrina.
Hola. So I am Sabrina Amrani, founder of the gallery Sabrina Amrani. We opened in 2011, and our program is very much international. And among this international program, we represent several artists from Asia and two artists from Korea, Timothy Yoon-Soo Lee and Jong-Oh, that we have the pleasure to discuss with together today. So thank you to Art Plant Asia for this opportunity to introduce the gallery and the artist. Jong is actually participating in an exhibition in Seoul at the Deoksu-gong Palace with an outdoor installation. The exhibition has been curated by Haejong Jang and Yuli Yoon. I would like to thank you very much to all the team of Art Plant Asia for this invitation. I really wish we could be with you today in Seoul, and I hope that very soon we can join. But let's start this conversation. Jong-Oh was born in Mauritania in 1981, and he grew up between Spain and South Korea. He spent several years living in New York, where he graduated in an MFA in visual arts after he earned a BFA at the Hongik University in Seoul. Jong has been exhibiting his work around the world, and we will talk about some of these exhibitions during the conversation. So Jong, you are currently based in Seoul, but I cannot really say that your studio is in Seoul. Your studio is really a suitcase. That's what you many times explain during the interviews you do. This is a great specificity of your practice. Tell us more about it, please.
Yes, I would say that I'm currently based in Seoul because it's difficult to travel during the pandemic. But usually I don't have a permanent studio or home because I travel constantly to install my works. Most of my works are site responsive, so I cannot send my works to do an exhibition. So whenever I have to show, I just carry my suitcase and start to work on site. Wherever I need to install, it could be a gallery, a museum, or someone's home. I consider that space as my studio.
And we are in fact viewing the material and your suitcase. But before going into more details, I wanted to know what prompted you to work that way as a nomadic artist, and what have you learned so far in this process, in this way of working?
I think the site responsiveness of my work naturally made me become a nomadic artist. I always thought that the space where I work in and the art that I create are not separate. It's like how a place we live in becomes a big part of our identity. And I learned that my life and what I create is also not separate. Like, as you explained before, I had a quite nomadic life, and this way of life naturally affected my work and vice versa. And I feel it's very natural, and I like the fact that there is no border between my normal life and my work.
So let's see. In fact, now if we can come back to the image of the details, and I would like, before we see your work and what you create, I would like to see what you use and what are the materials that you use. What do you have in your tiny studio?
So basically, like, I don't have much materials. They are different strings and wires, some cutting tools and rulers. I also have a laser level, which is very helpful. and a small drill. Yeah, basically all my materials, which is not much. I have different kind of strings and wires, some cutting tools, rulers. I also have a laser level, which is very helpful, and also a small drill. But I also carry all the stuff I own, my winter clothes, summer clothes, toothbrush and shampoo. And it's amazing how it just fits everything in my suitcase.
Now we're viewing, in fact, a small extract on how you work, and this is something that really surprised me when you came to Madrid several years ago for your first show at our gallery. I asked you if you needed anything to prepare the exhibition, and I had the chance to observe you during several days. And I have to say that as a gallerist, the first 3 days, I was a little afraid because the only thing you asked for was a chair. And I have this image, in fact, of you sitting on a chair into the space that was empty. So in fact, that's exactly the picture I took. So I would like to tell us about your process. What is your process of work? You say often that you listen to the space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so space is my inspiration. It's involved in the entire process, and it's also part of my work. So it's important not to dominate the space. And to do this, I need to maintain the balance between the space and what I create. I can't just create whatever I want. So I have to listen carefully to what the space and materials allows me to do. So I would say that the process of making is a constant conversation between the space, material, and myself. And the finished work is a record of this conversation.
Okay, now we will see some images of your first show at the Gallery Lodestar and in Madrid. The most striking aspect of your work is, in fact, its subtleness, and it's conceptually, visually, and I would like to understand your process of creation of the work. We talked about the fact that you listen to the space, but I really would like to share with the audience how you come up with this sculpture.
Usually for a few days I'm just sitting in a corner, in another corner, or just walking around trying to listen to the space. And when you enter to an empty space, it seems like there is nothing much going on, and like there is no much connection with the space, and so it takes time to build a connection. But if you stay there for a while, you start to realize that there are a lot of elements to respond, and it's full of possibilities. For example, there is a nuance of the architecture, the light and the shadow that's created, corners, and even cracks or holes on the walls could be. And the doors or windows and stairs, they suggest a certain direction for the viewer. So all these things are could be my inspiration. And at some point, after a few days, I draw a line in the air, and it all starts from there.
Yeah, it's also something that worried me. I have to say, the first time when we worked together, the first time, it's the fact that after a few days, I would enter the gallery and there would be like one line suspended. On the fourth day, there would be a second line on another corner, and I had imagined as many would expect from the artist, that they would prepare a piece and then execute it. And this is not your process. And you do not work only on one single work, one after one after one, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like to work in several works at one time, because the process is quite intuitive, and sometimes I get stuck and I need some space with this piece, and it's like a relationship with a human being. Like sometimes you need some space in between for a better relationship, and I think it's the same for me with work.
Well, in fact, there is. What do you expect of the relationship of the viewer? I mean, of the visitor, when we see your work. What are you expecting from us? What do you want to trigger?
I want the viewers, to spend time in the space, open their senses, and really be in the moment, because my works are almost invisible. It's illusional, and it's about the perception of space. I think my work has several layers of subtle experiences. So the experience is a slow process of discovery. So I think it really needs time to experience it well. Yeah, and as it is for me when I create, I hope it's meditative for the viewers too.
Yeah, your work is in fact also something that I mean, there is two definitions that I like to share about your work. I like to say that it's a sculpture, but it's also a drawing. I like to say that you draw, in fact, in the air of the space, and this extreme minimalism in your work. You compare it to the shijo or haiku. Have you been and are you inspired by this kind of poetry?
I first read the shijo, or Japanese haikus, in 2012, when a Japanese audience mentioned that my works were like haikus. I didn't know what they were at that time, so I looked it up and immediately connected. And I realized that in Korea we have this similar form of poetry that is called shijo. And these poems have a strict structural rule. For example, it has to be only 3 lines. It can't be more than 17 syllables. And I found this is so similar, like the way you need to deal with the restrictions and stay simple, but at the same time you have to convey something and have a resonance. So yeah, I thought both these poems and my work, they exist in the border between something and nothing.
So you are talking about the simplicity of the material, and here there is indeed, we can see, so you use threads. This is a wall piece that we are viewing right now, where you use a thread that you paint with your fingers. Can you tell us about the images we are viewing now?
Yeah, these are wall drawings, and this is a cuboid, and yeah, they are these simple sculptures or drawings that respond to the space that it's created.
We see little chains, wood, And also what I think was important for us to, it's always very hard to document your work, but there is in your work the importance of the perception, and you have been talking about the viewers and what role it plays. But can you tell us about the perception?
So I think my work keeps changing and depending on where you stand and on how much time you spend on. Yeah. And it keeps changing. You start to see different things. You start to create a story between the materials, the objects. So yeah, it's this constant change in the work, and this in the beginning it looks simple, so, but at one point it becomes complex, and again simple, so yeah, that's why I talk about this perception, and I believe everybody has a different experience. Yeah.
In fact, again, I mean, you say my work it's simple, but at the same time it has a lot of complexity in it, and it's true that this very minimalistic gesture that you have, I think it would be interesting to go backwards and to see what you were doing at the beginning and with very few pieces, and see how you get, how you arrive to this simplicity, because now it's a decade that you are a professional artist. So I wanted to go back on how your practice was born.
Yeah, in my earlier works, I used a lot of found objects. There were all kinds of things like cosmetic brush, bike spokes, like chair parts that I collected from the area where I live. And I created these sculptures by using gravity as a force to put them together. Gravity was one of my materials, but also they were my limits. So the materials were pushing, pulling, and hanging onto each other to maintain the tension and the balance. And over time, my works were getting more minimal because I was getting more interested into the details. And also I was starting to have interest in perception and how it changes depending on the perspective. Like this green piece keeps, has a slight change on the form as you move. And at one point I started to see the space around it. Like that piece has a corner, and I was, the beginning, I was not sure what to do with it, but I decided to accept it. And that's how, slowly I started to work with the space around it and bring it as part of my work.
This piece, in fact, that we are viewing, it's nails, drawing on the wall, thread, and wires, maybe?
There's a bike spokes hanging on the string, and there is in the back there is a drop of an ink on the wall.
From which year is that piece?
I think that was like 2011.
And this is a very pivotal work. This exhibition that you participated in, it's really, I think, the first piece that is a turning point, and that take you where we are today. In fact,
right. It's I didn't realize that time, but it was a point where there was a space like coming into the piece, into my work.
There is another series of work of yours that I found also find fascinating, which is a mix again between drawing and sculpture. They are titled the folding drawings. When did you start this body of work?
I started this series in 2017. I participated in a book project called Float Series by Heads Up Press in Korea. The project was made by photographer Jung Hee-seung and designer Park Yeon-ju. And they basically gave me a blank 16-page A4 size book to create an artwork with it. So I consider the book as a moving space with sequences and made a drawing in the entire book based on this idea. I like the folded surface, and as it folds, it transforms the space and opens dialogue between angled surfaces and shadows. Yeah, so that's how the first piece in the image is showing was created. And now it's becoming, I'm expanding the variety of the forms.
So in fact, it's very interesting, this drawing that this folding drawing that we are viewing now, because at some point you started to, I mean, your work is very much about straight lines, angles, and at certain moment you started to introduce the curve in your work. And I would like to, I think it's related to a residency that you did in Spain at El Nucleo from the Foundation SZ here near Madrid. And I would like you to talk to us about that, about this experience. And
yeah, so I started to use these curved lines during the residency, El Nucleo, because I was very inspired by just walking around, and it was a place where they trained the horses to jump, and they were so beautiful, like the way they move, they jump. So I tried to use these movements I wanted to apply them into my work. And as you see on the folding drawing, you can kind of see that it's part of a movement of the folding, of the opening or closing planes, but it also becomes part of the drawing that I drew on the surface.
yes, there is. Sorry.
No, that's.
No, there is in fact you've been. It's very an ongoing. It's part of your practice. This series of folding drawings and the last pieces you have done. In fact, we are viewing them. They completely change. We are out of this simple square or rectangles that you have been working during many years.
Yeah, in the beginning was more about, inspired by the book and the simple forms. But as I'm making it, it's becoming more about these shapes and complex dimensions, the shadows, and I'm keeping to expand the idea. And at one point, I think I'm going to, make multiple works that is one piece, and maybe, I don't know, use a little subtle colors in it. I don't know where I'm going, but I'm very excited in this series, folding drawing series.
Yes, we are too, and in fact, I mean, the inspiration in a way of this work, you found it in the nature. We talked about movement, and your work is very much about geometry, architecture. It's very scientific in a way. But I've been trying to check again in the past and to find other connections to nature in your work. And I think nature has been present in your work since quite some time, though it doesn't seem evident.
Yes, since I work mostly indoors, I sometimes enjoy using elements from outside. And a lot of times I used found stones or rocks around the area that I stay. I think it doesn't mean it doesn't really mean or say anything. I just needed some weights, or I needed a specific form, or maybe a form that has a contrast to what I was making. So it's just an intuitive process. And sometimes I used water images. I started doing them during a residency in Austria. It was a Krinzinger project residency. And at that time, I was looking for something from outside to include it in my installation. And it was a daily routine to take pictures from around the area. And I found that the image of the water surface was quite interesting, because it was just a print on a thin paper. And it was amazing how it creates a depth in the space when it was suspended. That's how I started using the surface water.
In fact, your work is always site-specific. I mean, I would say most of the time, but I think I can say always, because I mean, you create your sculpture in response to the space, in response to the space where it lives, and in fact, many times they are in a way an extension of the architecture where they live in. And at the same time, even this series of work with water, I remember asking you about, and you said, I would say, it would be nice if you can do it also in Madrid. And you said, but is there water in Madrid? Is there a river? And unfortunately, we have a river, but it's totally dry. So there is no water. And you explained to me that you really can only create these pieces in places where water is actually there. And do you have this? Do you imagine a practice of yours where this direct connection with the place would not be that necessary? Is it something that you project or tried maybe in the past?
I always feel a connection where I'm staying. Like I said, there is no border between my life and my art. So I can't imagine like separating the area where I'm staying or the space that I work. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, coming back to today. So you are in Seoul, and it's you are showing in the garden of the Palace Doksugang. Is it the first time that you are working outdoor? And we are viewing, in fact, images of the installation. So can you also tell us about what you have been doing and the inspiration, etc.?
Yeah, I've done a few outdoor installations like this 8 years ago when I did the LMCC residency in New York. At that time, they were very simple and small geometrical installations that responded to the structural form of the tree branches. But this time in Doksugung, I'm doing a much larger scale with complex structure because there are a lot of big trees and it's surrounded with beautiful traditional Korean architecture. I thought it was a nice contrast with the nature, but at the same time, as you move around, it starts to overlap with the architecture of the palace. And that's why I thought it would fit really well in the garden of the palace.
Well, I wish we could visit it. It's very complex, but I really invite all the visitors in Seoul to see this exhibition if they have not seen it yet. I have, in fact, a last question. I mean, your work is very much site-specific, and you've been talking a lot about, we've been talking a lot about this connection that you have with the moment and the space where you are. And this is a very strong connection with your work and what you create. So as a gallerist and you an artist, and now it's a decade that you work as a professional artist. So we are in part of your work is also to exhibit internationally in art fairs. And I wanted to ask you about how do you approach your practice within the context of the art fair, which is an ephemeral space, and how do you process that, and how do you work with this specific context?
Yeah, like you see in the image, even in this simple white box, I see a lot of elements that I can work with. The first time I saw the booth, I thought about symmetry. So I started with a piece in the middle, in the center, that divided the space. And I also saw the light, the height of the ceiling, and I imagined how like the direction of the viewers moving in the booth, and all these kind of elements were the base of this booth. And I mean, if the art fairs are mainly to sell the works, and if someone likes a piece and has a space that could fit the exact work, then it would be fine. But if they don't have a space for that piece, I would a lot of times visit their homes and create a work that is specific for their space. That's the way how I work in art fairs.
It's been in fact quite I think a way of work, a challenge. I mean, doing this solo show that we are viewing some images of the works. It was for Art Basel Hong Kong 2019, so last year. And in fact, 3 or 4 pieces of this show were acquired by the National Gallery of Victoria, a museum in Australia, and the others were acquired by Asian collectors, Chinese and Korean collectors, in fact. But I mean, one of the questions we had, and I think it was also maybe the first time we were in that situation, is that when a museum acquires your work, there is also the idea of the perennity or sustainability of the work, the passing of time, because museums collect for the future. So in 100 years, when you and me will not be there. So how has it been for you, this new dimension where the idea that your work is also can be disconnected to this precise time and disconnected from you in the future?
Yeah, it was quite challenging and interesting for me. That the idea of collecting my work, especially like in a museum. So I had to think about tacking, which I've never really done before, and making instructions, very precise instructions. And yeah, the more I thought, I mean, the works look very delicate and subtle, but in fact, I think it's quite strong. And if it has to, if there is a force that has to destroy my work, that force could destroy any kind of artwork. So I don't think it's such a big problem in collecting. And also, I would say that it's easy to repair. So, for example, like paintings, it has to be a certain specific paint, and maybe in the future it will be difficult to find it. But I use very simple materials, which it's always there, and I think anyone can, be able to fix it.
Well, I think it's we shared a lot of insights and secrets on your practice. So I do not have a better image than a photograph of your last exhibition in Madrid in fact, a year ago in one of our spaces in Salaberry. So this is the space, in fact, I am talking to you from this space. I'm talking to you today. I hope we will have the pleasure to welcome you again very soon in Madrid. I would like to thank you, Jong. Gamsahamnida. Thank you very much to all of us for joining this conversation. And thank you again, Art Plant Asia and the curators and the team for this opportunity to share with you this interesting conversation with Zhong O.
Thank you, Sabrina. I hope you stay safe, and I hope the pandemic situation ends as soon as possible so I could visit you.
With great pleasure. So now it's time to invite you to ask questions to Zhong O. Zhong that is actually present with you in Seoul.